The Naval Special Warfare Command had scheduled the ceremony for 0900 hours sharp. The parade ground at Coronado stretched flat and perfect beneath the California sun, freshly raked gravel aligned in geometric precision. Families filled the bleachers. Flags hung motionless in the morning stillness. 32 Navy SEALs stood in formation, dress whites crisp, medals catching light like Morse code against their chests. Among them stood Petty Officer First Class Marcus Reed and his K-9 partner, a Belgian Malinois named Titan. They had completed 4 deployments together: Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and one classified operation Reed still couldn't discuss with his own wife. Titan had detected IEDs that would have killed dozens. He had tracked insurgents through mountain passes where human senses failed. He had never once disobeyed a command, until that morning. The base commander was mid-speech, voice amplified across the parade ground, when Titan planted his 70 pounds of muscle into the gravel and refused to move. His ears flattened, his body went rigid, a low growl vibrated through his chest, not at a person, but at the ground itself. Reed felt the tension travel up the leash like an electric current. He gave the command twice. Titan didn't budge. Then the chaplain's voice cracked. The microphone squealed, and the earth beneath half the formation gave way with a sound like thunder trapped underground. What happened in the next 11 seconds would be investigated by 3 federal agencies, replayed on news channels worldwide, and taught in every K-9 handler course from that day forward. That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine ceremony became a moment every sailor on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and trusting what can't be explained. Chapter 1. Formation. The Pacific wind carried salt and diesel fuel across the Coronado parade ground. Reed adjusted his cover, checked the alignment of his ribbons one final time, and glanced down at Titan. The dog sat perfectly at heel, eyes forward, breathing steady. 4 years together had made them a single operational unit. Reed knew Titan's moods better than he knew his own. Looking sharp, Reed. Lieutenant Commander Voss walked the formation line, inspecting each SEAL with the practiced eye of a man who had survived 3 decades in naval special warfare. Titan, too. That dog's got more discipline than half the new recruits. Thank you, sir. Voss moved on. The ceremony was supposed to be simple. Awards presentation for the squadron's recent deployment, a speech from the base commander, then dismissal for a long weekend. Reed's daughter had flown in from Oregon. His wife had ironed his whites twice to get the creases perfect. Everything was routine, except Titan's ears kept twitching. Reed noticed it during the national anthem, small movements, almost imperceptible. The dog's focus shifted from straight ahead to the ground, then back again. His nostrils flared. Reed had seen that behavior before. In Fallujah, seconds before, Titan detected a pressure plate buried under market debris. In Kandahar, moments before, he alerted to explosives hidden in a false wall. But this was Coronado. This was home. The base commander took the podium. Admiral Henshaw had a voice that carried authority across any distance. Today, we recognize courage under fire, dedication beyond measure, and the bonds that make this community the finest fighting force on Earth. Titan's growl started so low Reed felt it before he heard it. Easy, Reed whispered, barely moving his lips. The dog's muscles tensed, his weight shifted back onto his haunches. Reed had never seen him do this during a formation. Other handlers noticed. Senior Chief Ortiz, 3 positions down with his German Shepherd, gave Reed a questioning look. Reed shook his head slightly. I don't know. Admiral Henshaw continued. These sailors have demonstrated exceptional valor, Titan barked. One sharp, urgent bark that cut through the Admiral's speech like a rifle crack. Heads turned. Families in the bleachers leaned forward. Reed's face burned. A K-9 breaking silence during a ceremony was grounds for disciplinary review. He tugged the leash. "Tighten! Heel!" The dog didn't move. His eyes locked on something beneath the gravel. His entire body vibrated with the effort of staying in place when every instinct screamed to act. Admiral Henshaw paused. "Is there a problem, Petty Officer Reed?" Every eye on the parade ground fixed on Reed. His commanding officer, his teammates, his family. 300 witnesses to what looked like a catastrophic failure of discipline. Reed's mouth went dry. "Sir, my K-9 is alerting to—" The microphone shrieked feedback. The chaplain, standing near the podium's edge, stumbled. His foot broke through the gravel surface, and for one suspended second, everyone saw the hollow darkness beneath. Then the earth collapsed. Chapter 2. Collapse. The sound came first, a deep, grinding roar like a subway train passing underground. Then the movement. A section of parade ground 30 feet across simply dropped, taking 12 SEALs, the podium, and half the color guard with it. Reed felt the ground tilt. Titan lunged backward, pulling him away from the expanding crater. Men shouted. Families screamed. The bleachers emptied in seconds as people ran toward the collapse or away from it, chaos replacing ceremony in a single breath. Reed regained his footing and looked into the hole. 15 feet down, maybe 20, SEALs were climbing over each other, some injured, all covered in dust and splintered wood. The podium had landed sideways. Admiral Henshaw was down there, conscious but pinned beneath debris. "Medical! We need corpsmen now!" Lieutenant Commander Voss was already rappelling down, using someone's belt as a rope. "Check for secondaries! Watch the edges!" Reed's training took over. He secured Titan to a fence post 20 feet back, then joined the rescue effort. More SEALs poured in from adjacent buildings. Within 90 seconds, they had ropes deployed, a triage area established, and a human chain pulling injured sailors from the crater. The base alarms started wailing. Fire trucks and ambulances converged from 3 directions. Reed hauled up a petty officer with a broken arm, then went back down for another. Dust choked the air. Somewhere beneath the collapse, water was flooding. A broken pipe or underground stream. Senior Chief Ortiz appeared at Reed's shoulder. His German shepherd also secured away from the danger zone. "Your dog knew?" "Yeah." "How?" Reed shook his head. He was pulling Admiral Henshaw free, careful of the man's left leg, which was twisted at a wrong angle. "Unknown, Senior Chief, he just knew." They lifted the Admiral out. Corpsmen immediately surrounded him, checking vitals, stabilizing the fracture. Henshaw grabbed Reed's sleeve, his face gray with pain, but his eyes clear. "That dog saved half my command." Reed didn't know what to say. He just nodded. By the time they pulled the last SEAL from the crater, 23 minutes had passed. 12 injured, none critical, 0 fatalities. The base commander was already calling it a miracle. The geological engineers who arrived 90 minutes later called it something else. Sinkhole, the lead engineer told the assembled command staff in the temporary headquarters they'd established in the gymnasium. Underground cavity, probably from old construction or drainage failure. The weight of the formation, the vibrations from the microphone, it was enough to trigger collapse. "How long has it been unstable?" Voss asked. "Unknown. Could be months, could be years." The engineer looked at his tablet. "What I can't explain is how your K-9 detected it. Dogs can sense structural weakness through vibration, temperature changes, even air pressure variations humans can't perceive. But this level of advance warning? That's exceptional." Reed stood in the back of the room, still in his dress whites, now torn and filthy. Titan sat beside him, calm again, as if nothing unusual had happened. The dog's training had been extensive, explosives detection, patrol work, apprehension. But geological prediction wasn't in any manual. Admiral Henshaw, leg casted and elevated, looked directly at Reed. "Petty officer, your K-9 exhibited behavior that contradicted standing orders during a formal ceremony. Under normal circumstances, that would require disciplinary review. Reed's stomach dropped. Yes, sir. These are not normal circumstances. Henshaw's voice filled the gymnasium. I'm recommending Titan for commendation, and I'm ordering a full investigation into why our ground surveys missed a cavity that size. The room murmured approval. Reed felt relief flood through him, but it was temporary, because standing near the door was a civilian he didn't recognize. Dark suit, federal credentials visible even from across the room. The man was watching Titan with the focused intensity of someone who had just found something valuable. Chapter 3. Questions. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service arrived before sunset. They set up in Building 12, the administrative wing that usually handled personnel files and logistics. Special Agent Carver introduced herself with the brisk efficiency of someone who had investigated everything from espionage to equipment theft. Petty Officer Reed, we're not here to accuse anyone of wrongdoing, she said, gesturing for him to sit in the folding chair across from her temporary desk. We're trying to understand what happened. Reed sat. Titan lay at his feet, unconcerned. Through the window, he could see engineers still working around the collapse site, now cordoned off with yellow tape and portable barriers. Walk me through Titan's behavior before the collapse, Carver said, opening a tablet. Everything you noticed. Reed described it. The ear twitches, the shift in focus, the growl, the bark. Carver typed rapidly, occasionally asking clarifying questions. How long had the behavior lasted? Had Titan ever exhibited similar alerts during training? What were the environmental conditions? Your K9's training record is exceptional, Carver said. 4 deployments, 97 confirmed IED detections, 0 false positives in the last 18 months. That's statistically remarkable. He's a good dog. He's more than that, Petty Officer. Carver leaned forward. I've been investigating military working dogs for 6 years. What Titan did this morning goes beyond trained behavior. It suggests predictive capability we don't fully understand. Reed chose his words carefully. Dogs have senses we don't, ma'am. He probably detected subsurface vibrations or air pressure changes. Probably. Carver pulled up a video on her tablet, then turned it toward Reed. This is footage from the ceremony. Watch Titan's behavior between 0857 and 0859. Reed watched. The video showed the formation from a bleacher angle, families visible in the foreground. Titan's alert progression was clear. The shift from parade rest to active concern happened over 90 seconds. His focus never wavered from the exact section of ground that would later collapse. He pinpointed it, Reed said quietly, to within 6 feet. Carver paused the video. Now tell me, has Titan ever alerted to geological instability before? No, ma'am. Not that I'm aware of. Have you noticed any unusual behavior in the last week? Changes in routine, stress indicators, anything? Reed thought back. He's been more alert at night, restless. I assumed it was the ceremony prep. He doesn't like dress formations. Or he was sensing something wrong with the parade ground. Carver closed the tablet. The base commander wants Titan examined by veterinary specialists. They want to understand if this capability can be trained, replicated, or at least documented. Reed's protective instinct flared. He's not a lab experiment. No one's suggesting that, but if K9 units can be trained to detect structural failures, it could save lives in earthquake zones, collapse situations, urban search and rescue. Carver's expression softened. I have 2 dogs at home, Petty Officer. I understand the bond. This examination would be voluntary, non-invasive, and you'd be present for everything. Reed looked down at Titan. The dog's eyes were half closed, relaxed, trusting. When? Tomorrow morning, Naval Medical Center, San Diego. Their veterinary team has already been briefed. Carver stood. For what it's worth, Petty Officer Reed, What your K9 did today was extraordinary. The investigation is standard protocol, nothing more. Reed nodded and left with Titan. Outside, the sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the base in amber and shadow. Other SEALs stopped him as he walked back to his quarters. Handshakes, pats on Titan's head, quiet words of thanks. His daughter ran up and hugged him, not caring that his uniform was ruined. "Dad, everyone's saying Titan's a hero. He just did his job, sweetie." But that night, lying in his bunk with Titan on the floor beside him, Reed couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment Titan refused to move. The dog had overridden months of discipline training because something deeper, some instinct or sense humans didn't possess, had screamed danger. Reed reached down and scratched behind Titan's ears. The dog sighed contentedly. "What else can you sense?" "Buddy," Reed whispered, "what else are we missing?" Titan didn't answer, but somewhere in the dark, his ears twitched once, listening to frequencies Reed would never hear. "Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach." Chapter 4. Examination Naval Medical Center. San Diego smelled like antiseptic and floor polish. Reed signed in at the veterinary wing, then followed a corpsman through corridors lined with exam rooms and surgical suites. Titan walked calmly at heel, unbothered by the unfamiliar environment. Dr. Sarah Chen met them in exam room 4. She was a veterinary neurologist, Navy Reserve, with credentials from UC Davis and published research on canine sensory perception. She knelt to Titan's level immediately, letting him sniff her hand before touching him. "Beautiful animal," she said, "and his medical records are flawless. You take good care of him, petty officer." "He takes care of me, ma'am." Chen smiled. "Let's see if we can understand how." She gestured to the examination table. "We'll start with basic neurological assessment, then move to sensory response testing, nothing invasive. If Titan shows stress at any point, we stop." Reed lifted Titan onto the table. The dog stood calmly while Chen performed the standard exam. Eyes, ears, reflexes, gait. Everything normal. Then she moved to more specialized tests. "I'm going to play a series of frequencies," Chen explained, pulling up a program on her tablet. "Some will be in normal human range, others subsonic or ultrasonic. Watch his responses." The first tones produced nothing. Titan's ears tracked the sound, but his body remained relaxed. Then Chen moved into the subsonic range. Frequencies below 20 Hz felt more than heard. Titan's posture changed immediately. His ears flattened, his weight shifted. "There," Chen said, noting the frequency. "He's perceiving vibrations most dogs would ignore." She adjusted the program. "Now let's try something else." She placed a small device on the floor beneath the exam table. "This generates micro-vibrations similar to what you'd feel before seismic activity. It's barely detectable, even with instruments." The moment she activated it, Titan's alert behavior from the ceremony returned. Low growl, fixed stare at the floor, muscles tensing for movement. Reed gave the release command. Titan relaxed immediately, but his eyes stayed focused on the device. Chen deactivated it. Remarkable. He's not just sensing the vibration, he's interpreting it as a threat signal. She made notes on her tablet. Most K9s are trained to alert to specific threats: explosives, narcotics, human scent. Titan's doing something different. He's generalizing threat patterns across modalities. Meaning he's extrapolating. He learned that certain vibrations mean danger in combat zones. IEDs shifting, structural instability from explosions. Now he's applying that learning to any vibration pattern that matches the threat profile. Chen looked at Titan with professional admiration. It's adaptive intelligence at a very high level. Special Agent Carver entered the room, carrying a file folder. "Dr. Chen, do you have results?" Preliminary findings suggest Petty Officer Reed's K9 has exceptional sensitivity to subsonic frequencies and micro-vibrations. Combined with his combat experience and threat pattern learning, he's essentially functioning as an early warning system for structural instability. Carver opened her folder, which brings me to why I'm here. NCIS has completed the site investigation. The sinkhole was caused by a collapsed drainage tunnel from the 1940s. Original construction records were lost in a fire in 1967. No one knew it existed. So it was random, Reed said. The collapse was random. Titan's detection of it wasn't. Carver pulled out a photograph, aerial view of the parade ground with the collapse site marked. Here's what's interesting. We mapped subsurface features using ground-penetrating radar. There are 3 other potential weak points on this base, all from the same era of construction. Reed felt his stomach tighten. How weak? Unknown. Could be stable for decades. Could fail tomorrow. Carver looked at Titan, which is why the base commander is proposing a pilot program. Use K9 units trained in threat detection to survey high-traffic areas for structural weakness. Dr. Chen frowned. That's not standard K9 utilization. You'd be asking dogs to detect something they weren't specifically trained for. We'd be asking them to do what Titan already did, recognize patterns of danger. Carver turned to Reed. This would be voluntary. You and Titan would work with engineering teams, surveying buildings and infrastructure. If the concept proves viable, we expand it fleet-wide. Reed looked at Titan. The dog met his eyes with the calm trust that had defined their partnership through 4 deployments and countless missions. They had hunted insurgents together, cleared buildings where every shadow could hide death, walked roads where one wrong step meant obliteration. Now they were being asked to hunt invisible threats buried in the ground beneath their own base. How long would the pilot program last? Reed asked. 6 months. If it works, we formalize it. If not, you return to standard duties. Carver closed the folder. But Petty Officer Reed, whether you volunteer or not, Titan's actions yesterday are going to be studied. Other agencies are already asking questions. FBI disaster response, FEMA urban search and rescue, even the USGS. He's a military working dog, not a research project. I understand that, which is why I'm asking you to volunteer for the pilot program. Keep it in-house. Keep control of the training parameters and deployment protocols. Better than having federal agencies request access through channels you can't influence. Reed understood the leverage. Carver was giving him a choice, but the alternative was less appealing. I need to talk to my chain of command. Already done. Lieutenant Commander Voss approved it. Final decision is yours. Reed scratched Titan's ears. The dog leaned into the touch, content. Outside the exam room, Reed could hear the normal sounds of the veterinary clinic. Dogs barking, staff talking, equipment humming. Routine military life continuing while they stood at the edge of something new. Okay, Reed said. We'll do it. Chapter 5. Survey, the pilot program began on a Tuesday morning with ground-penetrating radar equipment, 3 civilian engineers, and Lieutenant Commander Voss documenting everything with the skepticism of a SEAL who had seen too many good ideas fail in practice. Show me how this works, Voss said. Reed led Titan to the first survey site, Building 23, a barracks that had housed SEALs since the Korean War. The engineers had already mapped the subsurface with their equipment, identifying 2 potential anomalies beneath the foundation. They hadn't told Reed where. Titan, search. The command was familiar, same one Reed used for explosive detection. But instead of moving through a space checking for chemical signatures, Titan walked slowly, head low, focusing on the ground itself. His pace was methodical, deliberate. 50 feet from the building entrance, Titan stopped, sat, alert position, Reed marked the location with orange spray paint. The lead engineer checked his tablet, then looked up with surprise. "That's Cavity 1. Direct hit." He moved to the next marked location on his map. "Let's see if he can find the second one." Reed gave the search command again. Titan worked the perimeter, ignoring distractions. Other SEALs walking past. A maintenance crew working on air conditioning units, birds landing nearby. His focus never wavered. At the northeast corner, he alerted again. "Cavity 2, the engineer confirmed. "Unbelievable. Your dog just did in 10 minutes what took our equipment 4 hours. Voss made a note. "What's the accuracy rate on those alerts?" "Ground-penetrating radar at this depth, 70, maybe 80% reliable. We get false positives from pipes, rebar, even dense soil." The engineer watched Titan, who was now relaxed, waiting for the next command. "If your K9 maintains this accuracy, he's outperforming our technology." They spent the week surveying 12 buildings. Titan identified 17 potential weak points. The engineers confirmed 14. The 3 discrepancies were areas where Titan alerted, but GPR showed nothing, until they excavated and found collapsed utility tunnels too small for the radar to register clearly. 0 false positives. By Friday, word had spread across the base. Other handlers started asking questions. Could their K9s do the same? Was this trainable? Senior Chief Ortiz brought his German Shepherd to observe, watching how Titan worked, trying to understand the pattern. "He's reading something we're not," Ortiz said during a break. "Watch his head position. He's not just smelling the ground, he's listening to it." Reed had noticed the same thing. Titan's ears tracked micro-movements, adjusting for each surface type, each building structure. Concrete produced different vibrations than asphalt. Old foundations resonated differently than new construction. The dog was learning the language of structural integrity in real time. Admiral Henshaw, now walking with a cane but back on duty, visited the survey site on Friday afternoon. He watched Titan work for 20 minutes without speaking, then pulled Reed aside. "How's he handling the workload?" "Good, sir. We break every 90 minutes. Keep sessions short. He's not stressed." "And you?" Reed hesitated. The question was more personal than professional. "It's different, sir. Feels less like military work, more like problem-solving." "It's both." Henshaw leaned on his cane, watching Titan investigate a section of parking lot. What that dog did at the ceremony started conversations at levels I can't discuss. Zeknav has questions. So does the Army Corps of Engineers. Everyone wants to know if this is reproducible. Is it? That's what we're trying to find out. Henshaw turned to face Reed directly. "How would you feel about training other handlers? Not taking Titan away from you, keeping you as the primary team, but teaching the methodology to qualified K9 units." Reed felt the weight of the question. He wasn't an instructor, he was an operator. But he also understood that what Titan had discovered was bigger than one dog, one handler, one ceremony. "I'd need support, sir. Real trainers, behavior specialists, not just me guessing. You'd have it. Dr. Chen from Naval Medical has already volunteered. So has the Naval Special Warfare K9 training cadre." Henshaw straightened, ignoring the pain in his leg. "Petty Officer Reed, leadership isn't always about charging through doors. Sometimes it's about recognizing when you've found something valuable and making sure it reaches the people who need it." That evening, Reed walked Titan along the beach adjacent to the base. The Pacific rolled in with its eternal rhythm, indifferent to human concerns. Titan ran through the shallow water, still a dog despite everything else, still finding joy in simple things. Reed's phone buzzed. Message from his wife. News van showed up at the house. Reporter asking about Titan. "I told them to leave." "You okay?" He typed back, "Fine. This is getting bigger than expected. Call you tonight." The media attention had started Wednesday. Local news, then regional. and then a CNN segment about the hero K9 who saved a Navy ceremony. Reed had declined all interview requests, so had Voss, but the story had momentum now, spreading beyond their control. Titan returned from the water, shaking spray across Reed's uniform pants. The dog looked up at him with the uncomplicated trust that had defined their entire partnership. "You have no idea what you started." "Do you?" Reed said. Titan wagged his tail, waiting for whatever came next. Chapter 6. Replication. The first training session began with 8 K9 handler teams from across naval special warfare. German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and one Dutch Shepherd whose handler swore could detect threats through concrete walls. They gathered in the training yard at 600, dogs alert, handlers skeptical. Doctor Chen stood beside Reed. She had prepared a presentation, but Lieutenant Commander Voss cut her off before she started. "No PowerPoint," Voss said. "Show them." Reed led Titan to the demonstration area. The engineers had buried 4 containers at varying depths, 3 empty, 1 containing a small speaker generating subsonic vibrations. Reed gave the search command. Titan worked the grid methodically, passed the first 3 containers without reaction. At the 4th, he alerted, "Sit, focus, hold position." "That's your target," Reed said to the assembled handlers. "Now watch what happens when I change the parameters." The engineers activated a second speaker, different location, different frequency. Titan's head turned immediately. He moved to the new position, alerted again. "He's not detecting containers," Reed explained. "He's detecting vibration patterns that match threat profiles from combat experience, subsonic movement, structural stress, pressure changes." One handler raised his hand. "How do we train that? Our K9s alert to specific sense. C4, TNT, narcotics. This is conceptual." Dr. Chen stepped forward. "You're already training it, you just don't realize it. When your K9 alerts to an IED, what's he actually detecting? The chemical signature, yes, but also the context, buried object, disturbed soil, human scent where it shouldn't be. That's pattern recognition across multiple sensory inputs." She pulled up a diagram on her tablet. "What we're doing is expanding the pattern library, teaching K9s to recognize structural instability the same way they recognize explosive devices, as a constellation of signals that indicate danger." The training lasted 6 weeks. Not every dog showed Titan's capability. Some couldn't distinguish subsonic frequencies from environmental noise. Others showed aptitude, but lacked the combat experience to generalize the pattern. But 3 teams demonstrated consistent, reproducible results. Senior Chief Ortiz's German Shepherd detected a failing water main beneath the base commissary 2 weeks before it would have flooded the entire building. A Belgian Malinois from SEAL Team 7 identified foundation cracking in the armory that structural engineers had missed. The Dutch Shepherd found a collapsed storm drain under the helicopter pad. By week 5, they had prevented 3 potential infrastructure failures. Admiral Henshaw attended the final evaluation. The test was designed to be difficult. Mixed environments, multiple distractions, targets that conventional equipment struggled to identify. 8 K9 teams worked the course. 4 passed with acceptable accuracy. Titan's performance remained the baseline standard. After the evaluation, Henshaw gathered all the handlers in the briefing room. "What you've accomplished in 6 weeks usually takes 6 months of program development. The Chief of Naval Operations is watching this. So is the Secretary of Defense." He pulled up a map on the wall screen. "Military installations worldwide. We have infrastructure dating back to World War II, some older, much of it inadequately surveyed. What your K9s are doing could prevent catastrophic failures that risk lives and compromise readiness." Ortiz spoke up. "Sir, are we talking about scaling this across the fleet? If the pilot program results hold up under independent review, yes." Henshaw looked directly at Reed. Petty Officer Reed, you and Titan would be primary instructors for the expanded program. You'd train handler teams from all service branches. It would mean temporary assignment to the K-9 training center, possibly for a year or more. Reed felt his family life shift beneath him like unstable ground. A year at the training center meant relocation, different schools for his daughter, his wife putting her career on hold again. The same sacrifices they'd made through every deployment, every transfer, every time duty called. But he looked at the other handlers in that room, men and women who trusted their K-9 partners with their lives, who understood that the bond between handler and dog was sacred. And he knew the answer. "Yes, sir, we'll do it." The room erupted in quiet approval. Voss clapped him on the shoulder. Dr. Chen smiled. Titan, lying at Reed's feet through the entire briefing, yawned hugely. Unconcerned with career implications. That night, Reed called his wife from his quarters, explained the assignment, the timeline, the implications. She was quiet for a long moment. "This is important," she finally said. "Not a question, a statement. It could save lives. Then we'll make it work." He heard his daughter in the background, asking questions. His wife's voice grew distant as she explained. Then his daughter was on the phone. "Dad, is Titan going to be famous?" Reed looked at the dog, asleep on the bunk, front paws twitching in some dream of running. "He's just doing his job, sweetie." "That's what heroes do, though, right?" Reed smiled. "Yeah, I guess it is." If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Marcus Reed and Titan reach those who still believe in honor. Chapter 7. Expansion. The K-9 Training Center at Lackland Air Force Base, Texas, sprawled across 300 acres of specialized facilities and obstacle courses. Reed arrived in August with Titan and a mandate to develop a curriculum that could be taught to military working dog handlers from all service branches. He wasn't alone. Dr. Chen had transferred temporarily from Naval Medical. Senior Chief Ortiz volunteered for 6 months instructor duty. The Army sent 2 handlers from their combat tracker program. The Marines contributed a gunnery sergeant with 20 years of K-9 experience. Even the Coast Guard sent an observer. They called it the Structural Threat Detection Course. The first challenge was standardization. Each service branch had different K-9 training protocols, different operational philosophies, different equipment. What worked for Navy SEALs in urban combat didn't necessarily translate to Army engineers clearing bridges or Air Force security teams protecting installations. Reed found himself in meetings that felt nothing like military operations, discussing lesson plans, assessment metrics, training progression models. He was a warrior being asked to become an educator, and the transition felt uncomfortable. Dr. Chen helped. "You're not teaching them to be you," she said during one particularly frustrating curriculum review session. "You're teaching them to recognize what Titan showed you. That threat detection is about pattern recognition, not rigid protocols." They built the course in modules. Module 1 covered K-9 sensory biology, how dogs perceive subsonic frequencies, vibrations, pressure changes. Module 2 focused on handler observation skills, recognizing subtle behavioral shifts that indicated alert status. Module 3 introduced environmental assessment, understanding how different structures, materials, and conditions affected detection capability. The practical work happened in Module 4. Reed designed scenarios based on real-world infrastructure failures, simulated sinkholes, deteriorating foundations, compromised drainage systems. Each scenario required K-9 teams to identify the threat before conventional equipment could confirm it. The first class started in September. 16 handler teams representing all service branches. Reed stood in front of them on day 1, Titan at his side, and felt the weight of their expectation. "I'm not here to teach your K-9s to be Titan," Reed began. "Every dog has different capabilities, different strengths. What I'm here to teach is how to recognize and develop the capability your K9 already has. He walked them through Titan's alert sequence at the ceremony, breaking down each behavioral component. Then he had them observe their own K9s responding to subsonic generators, watching for the micro movements that indicated perception. "Your dog is already telling you things you're not hearing," Reed said. "Our job is to learn the language." The training was demanding. Handlers who expected simple scent detection work found themselves studying geology, structural engineering, and sensory neuroscience. Some struggled. 2 teams washed out in week 3, unable to achieve consistent detection results, but others excelled. A marine handler whose Belgian Malinois had worked IED detection in Helmand Province discovered his K9 could identify stress fractures in concrete. An Army engineer team found their German Shepherd could detect subsurface water movement that preceded foundation failure. An Air Force handler realized her K9 was sensing electromagnetic anomalies associated with corroded underground utilities. Each success expanded the program's scope. By November, they had graduated 4 classes. 64 handler teams certified in structural threat detection. Dogs deployed to military installations worldwide, conducting surveys that prevented failures before they happened. Reed received reports weekly. A failing retaining wall identified at Fort Bragg. Underground cable degradation detected at Ramstein Air Base. Compromised drainage at Pearl Harbor flagged before the rainy season. Every prevented failure justified the program's expansion, but success brought complications. The media attention that had started with Titan's ceremony alert had grown into sustained coverage. Feature stories in military publications, profiles in mainstream news. A documentary crew requested access to the training center. Reed declined, but the requests kept coming. Then came the congressional inquiry, House Armed Services Committee, Subcommittee on Readiness. They wanted testimony about the program's effectiveness, cost-benefit analysis, scalability. Admiral Henshaw flew to Washington. So did the Air Force general who commanded the K9 training center, and they wanted Reed. He testified on a Wednesday in December, wearing his dress blues. Titan, waiting in a secure facility adjacent to the Capitol. The committee room felt like a courtroom, formal, intimidating, designed to create pressure. "Petty Officer Reed," the subcommittee chairman began, "tell us how a dog prevented a catastrophe that our engineering surveys missed." Reed explained. The ceremony, Titan's alert, the collapse, the investigation. He kept his answers factual, professional, stripped of emotion. "And this capability can be replicated." "Yes, sir. 64 teams have been certified. Detection accuracy averages 78%, which exceeds current ground-penetrating radar reliability for comparable depth ranges." The questions continued for 90 minutes, cost projections, training timelines, integration with existing infrastructure maintenance protocols. Reed answered what he could, deferred technical questions to the subject matter experts present. Then a representative from California asked the question Reed had been dreading. "Petty Officer, some critics suggest this program is an inefficient use of elite military working dogs, that we're taking combat-proven K9 teams away from counterterrorism and force protection missions. How do you respond?" Reed chose his words carefully. "Ma'am, my K9 partner has 4 combat deployments. He's detected IEDs that saved American lives and Allied forces. I would never suggest that mission is less important than infrastructure survey. But Titan detected a threat on American soil, at a military installation that could have killed or injured dozens of sailors. Both missions protect lives. Both missions matter." The representative made notes. The chairman thanked Reed for his testimony. The session concluded. Afterward, in the hallway outside, Admiral Henshaw found Reed. "You did well in there." "Did I give them what they needed, sir?" "You gave them the truth. That's all we can do." Henshaw looked toward the window, where winter rain streaked the glass. The committee will make their decision in January. Program either gets formal authorization and funding, or it ends. Reed felt the precariousness of everything they'd built. 64 teams trained, infrastructure failures prevented, lives protected, all dependent on a budget allocation and political approval. What do we do until then, sir? We keep training. We keep preventing failures. We prove the program's value every single day. Henshaw turned back to Reed, and we trust that good work speaks for itself. Chapter 8. Legacy. The committee approved the program in January with a 3-year authorization and expanded funding. Structural threat detection became an official military occupational specialty. The K-9 Training Center added permanent facilities. What had started as a pilot program with 1 dog and 1 handler became institutionalized doctrine. Reed received orders to remain at Lackland as chief instructor through 2027. His family relocated from California to Texas. His daughter enrolled in a new school. His wife found work at a local veterans nonprofit. They adapted the way military families do. The work continued. By spring, they were training 12 classes simultaneously. Reed supervised a staff of 15 instructors now, handlers from all service branches, veterinary specialists, structural engineers embedded in the curriculum. The program had grown beyond anything he'd imagined that morning on the Coronado parade ground. Titan, now 7 years old, had officially retired from active survey work. He lived with Reed's family, still sharp, still alert, but no longer subjected to the physical demands of field work. On training days, Reed brought him to the center for demonstration purposes only. The new generation of detection K-9s was proving even more capable than the first. Selective breeding focused on subsonic sensitivity. Enhanced training protocols incorporated lessons learned from 64 deployed teams. Technology integration allowed handlers to record and analyze their K-9's responses in real time. But it had all started with Titan refusing to move. Reed thought about that often. How easily it could have gone differently if he'd forced Titan to hold formation, if he'd dismissed the alert as misbehavior, if he'd prioritized ceremony over instinct. 12 lives had depended on trusting something he didn't understand. In April, Reed received notification that he'd been selected for advancement to Chief Petty Officer. The promotion ceremony was scheduled for May at Lackland. Admiral Henshaw would preside. The entire K-9 training center would attend. His wife found him in his office the night before the ceremony, reviewing training schedules. She sat across from him, patient until he looked up. "You ready for tomorrow?" she asked. "Nervous, actually." "You've testified before Congress. You've trained hundreds of handlers. Why are you nervous about a promotion ceremony?" Reed smiled. "Because tomorrow's about the uniform, the rank, the responsibility, the ceremony at Coronado. That was about Titan saving lives. This feels different." It is different. That morning, Titan was the hero. Tomorrow, the Navy recognizes that you knew to trust him. She reached across the desk and took his hand. "Both things matter, Marcus. The dog's instinct and the handler's judgment. You can't separate them." The ceremony took place on the parade ground at Lackland. Different location, same formal precision that had defined that morning in Coronado. Reed's parents flew in from Wisconsin. His daughter wore her best dress. Titan sat beside them in the family section, a gray muzzle now visible where black had been. Admiral Henshaw read the promotion warrant. Reed saluted. The chief's anchor was pinned to his collar. His fellow instructors applauded. Standard military ceremony exactly as it should be. But afterward, during the reception, something unexpected happened. The handlers from Reed's first training class, the original 16 teams, had coordinated their leave schedules. They showed up in dress uniform, their K-9 partners at heel, and formed an honor corridor from the ceremony site to the reception hall. Reed walked through that corridor with Titan beside him. Each handler saluted. Each K9 sat at attention. It wasn't in any regulation or manual. It was respect given freely from professionals who understood what Reed and Titan had started. At the end of the corridor, Senior Chief Ortiz waited. "Figured you'd want your first salute as a chief to come from someone who knows what you actually did." Reed saluted. Ortiz returned it with the precision of 30 years' service. Then he handed Reed a challenge coin, custom-made, showing a Belgian Malinois in alert position with the words, "Trust the dog," engraved on the reverse. "From all of us," Ortiz said, "every handler you've trained." Reed couldn't speak for a moment. He just nodded and pocketed the coin. That evening, after the reception ended and the guests departed, Reed sat on his back porch with Titan. The Texas heat was building towards summer, crickets singing in the grass, neighbors' voices drifting across fences. His daughter came outside. "Dad, there's someone from the news here. They want to interview you about the promotion." Reed started to decline, then reconsidered. For 2 years he'd avoided media attention, kept the focus on the program rather than personalities. But maybe it was time to let people understand what military working dogs actually did. Not the Hollywood version, but the reality. "Tell them I'll do 5 minutes. Outside. Titan present." The reporter was young, professional, clearly briefed on the story. She set up quickly, asked smart questions, let Reed talk about the program without sensationalizing. "Chief Reed, what would you want people to understand about military working dogs?" Reed looked at Titan, who was watching a squirrel in the oak tree, completely unconcerned with interviews or ceremony or rank. "That they're not tools or equipment. They're partners who perceive things we can't. Our job isn't to control them, it's to learn from them. And sometimes that means trusting them even when we don't understand why." "Is that what you did at the Coronado ceremony?" "Yes. And it's what every handler we train learns to do. Listen to your K9. Trust their instincts. Because they're not guessing. They're reading a world we can barely perceive." The interview ended. The reporter thanked him and left. Reed sat back down beside Titan. "You started something, buddy," Reed said quietly. "Changed a lot of lives. Probably saved more than we'll ever count." Titan's tail thumped twice against the porch deck. Then he settled his head on his paws and closed his eyes, content. A hero at rest, surrounded by family, his work complete. Chapter 9. Full Circle. 3 years after the Coronado ceremony, Reed stood in front of his largest training class yet, 32 handler teams from 7 countries. The structural threat detection program had expanded beyond the U.S. military. NATO allies requested training. Japan sent observers. Australia integrated the curriculum into their military working dog programs. What Titan had started with a single alert had become international doctrine. Reed was a senior chief now, 2 more years of instructing behind him. His daughter was in high school. His wife had completed her master's degree. They had built a life in Texas that felt permanent in a way military postings rarely did. Titan had passed away 6 months earlier, peacefully in his sleep at 9 years old. The vet said his heart simply stopped. No pain, no warning. Just the quiet end that good dogs deserve. They buried him at the K9 Memorial Garden on base, with full military honors. Handlers from across the country attended. Reed still felt the absence every day, but Titan's legacy was everywhere. In the 247 certified handler teams working worldwide, in the 38 prevented infrastructure failures documented that year alone. In the curriculum that now taught thousands of handlers to recognize what Titan had shown them was possible. Dr. Chen had published 3 peer-reviewed papers on canine subsonic perception. Senior Chief Ortiz had retired and joined the training staff full-time. The program had its own dedicated facility now, purpose-built for structural threat detection training. And Reed had a new partner, Her name was Echo, a 2-year-old Belgian Malinois with exceptional vibration sensitivity. She wasn't Titan, no dog ever would be, but she had her own capabilities, her own way of reading the world beneath human perception. Reed worked with her daily, teaching the next generation of instructors how to develop that partnership, that trust. On a Thursday in March, Admiral Henshaw visited Lackland. He was retiring in June, ending a career that had spanned 4 decades. He walked the training facilities with Reed, watching Echo demonstrate detection techniques for a class of new handlers. "You've built something remarkable here, Senior Chief," Henshaw said. "When we started this, I wasn't sure it would last 6 months. Now it's permanent." "Titan built it, sir. I just helped other people understand what he already knew. Don't diminish your role." Henshaw stopped walking, turned to face Reed directly. "That morning at the ceremony, you had a choice. Force your K9 to maintain discipline, or trust behavior you didn't understand. You chose trust. That choice saved lives and created this entire program." Reed thought about that moment. Titan refusing to move, the weight of 300 eyes watching. The decision to let his K9's judgment override military protocol. "I almost didn't, sir. Almost gave him a direct command to stay in formation." "But you didn't, because somewhere beneath your training, your discipline, your understanding of military order, you trusted your partner more than the situation." Henshaw smiled. "That's leadership, Senior Chief, knowing when the rigid structure needs to bend." They walked back toward the administration building. Echo trotted at Reed's side, alert and focused. The Texas sun beat down on the training fields where handlers worked their K9s through detection scenarios. "I'm recommending you for command of this facility," Henshaw said. "When the current commander rotates out next year, you'd take over. Full program oversight, international coordination, curriculum development." Reed felt the weight of the offer. It would mean staying at Lackland indefinitely. It would mean administrative work, budget management, political coordination, all the things that took him further from actual dog handling. But it would also mean ensuring Titan's legacy continued, that the program stayed focused on the right priorities, that handlers learned not just technique, but trust.